Characters always die and come back in comics. It's a pretty normal thing. But how many times has Jean Grey died, you ask? Well, it's one of the hardest questions in X-Men lore because there's no one strict answer. Jean has died 4 or 10 or 15 times. It really just depends what you count as an actual death. I'm going to explain each time Jean died and all the times where it's debatable whether or not it counts as a canonical death. The first event where Jean quote unquote died is in issue 100 of Uncanny X-Men. In this issue, the X-Men were kidnapped by Sentinels and taken into space, so Jean offers to pilot the shuttle back home with her powers, but during the flight, she is exposed to solar radiation and let out a telepathic scream which reached the Phoenix Force, causing them to bond and saving Jean's life. And this is the first time Jean bonds with the Phoenix Force. Now, some people don't count this as a death and say the Phoenix Force saved her life rather than resurrecting her, but I think either interpretation is fine and leads to the same end result. The next one is the iconic Dark Phoenix saga. In issue 134, Jean turns into the Dark Phoenix due to Mastermind's manipulation, and she then goes on a cosmic rampage wiping out millions and the Debari galaxy. Seeing this threat, the Shi'ar and some other space empires decided the Dark Phoenix was too dangerous to live. The Imperial Guard then battles the X-Men on the moon to decide the Phoenix's fate. And in issue 137, after holding off the Dark Phoenix for a bit, Jean ends up sacrificing herself to save the universe and not cause any more harm. Now, this death would have been great and super impactful, but the issue is Marvel later retconned this in Avengers 263. The entity that died on the moon was actually the Phoenix Force copying Jean's form and mind, while the real Jean Grey was lying unconscious in a stasis cocoon at the bottom of Jamaica Bay. Jean then survives for a while till she is pronounced dead in Uncanny X-Men 281 from a Sentinel attack, but she actually transferred her conscious into Emma Frost and is later returned to her newly repaired body. This one is kind of just comics BS science, and I personally don't think it should be counted as an actual death, and I also don't think it's that relevant. It's not really important, people usually forget about it. And then we fast forward about a decade to Grant Morrison's New X-Men, in which Jean dies another 2 times. First, in New X-Men 148, Jean is sent hurtling towards the sun alongside Wolverine by Zorn, so with the intention of sparing Jean of a slow, painful death, Wolverine stabs her to death, but all this did was awaken Jean's connection to the Phoenix, which allowed her to stay alive. Then, just 2 issues later in New X-Men 150, Zorn is impersonating Magneto and hits Jean with a massive electromagnetic pulse. This causes a body-wide stroke and causes her to die in Cyclops' arms. Fast forward about a year or two, I believe, and Jean gets killed, yep, 6 more times. In the Phoenix Endsong series, the Phoenix Force once again tries to drag Jean out of the afterlife, so Jean begs Logan to repeatedly kill her, which he does so 6 times, with the intention to stop the resurrection process, but the plan doesn't work. However, Emma telepathically sent the Phoenix-possessed Jean all the love her friends and teammates felt for her, and with that, Jean transformed into the all-powerful White Phoenix and got Cyclops to optic blast her to death as she returned to the White Hot Room until she was later revived in 2017. I think one reason why Marvel repeatedly kills Jean is because it gives Cyclops something to grieve about. And for some reason, Marvel Comics just loves shitting on Cyclops' character. But that whole trope of Cyclops missing and grieving Jean is a story as old as time at this point, and it's really boring. We then fast forward to the Krakoan era. Jean is alive again, but not for long because she is a part of the Suicide Squad that goes to attack the Yorkist station and dies to the Sentinels, but is then resurrected with the rest of the team by the Five and the Krakoan Resurrection Protocols. We then go to the 2023 Hellfire Gala event when Jean is stabbed in the back by a cyborg Moira McTaggart during an Orcus attack, and is later revived by the Krakoan Protocols again. Up until now, those are the main times Jean has died, depending on how you interpret each death as a death or not. We also have some other instances, such as her getting snapped by Thanos, and the Age of Apocalypse reality Jean dying, but I think those are less important because the Thanos snap was a line-wide event, and Apocalypse reality is a completely different Jean to 616. So yeah, it's kind of become a running gag now for Jean to die and just come back a few years later, and her death lost impact decades ago, to be honest. So, to answer the question of the title, Jean Grey, in my opinion, has died 12 times. In 60 plus years of comics, 12 deaths, and yeah, not too bad, could be worse. Like, subscribe, come back next week, I've got more videos coming, and stay tuned, thanks for the support.